We're going to have a look today at how to detect and assess vulnerability risks in minutes. So just to give you a brief overview and some thoughts about this situation is that what we need in our environments is something which is going to give us continuous compliance. So an automated solution, which means that if I go out, if I have a solution and I go out and I fix all my vulnerabilities today, new vulnerabilities will come up tomorrow. But not only that, I might then start adding some new hosts to my environment or, expand my cloud. So there's going to be issues there that are going to need to be resolved as well. So what we need is a solution which will give us that continuous automated compliance, that when I come in every morning, I can see actually, yesterday everything was fine, but we've added a new host. We've got these vulnerabilities to deal with in that host. Or yesterday was fine, but a new vulnerability has come out, like Log4Shell or something like that. So I'm going to need to actually know about that so that I can deal with that to make sure my environment is secure. And this is, what the continuous, the automated continuous compliance is all about. And it means that, we can stay on top of everything that we're doing. One of the things that you should be aware of with Runecast is that if a new vulnerability like Log4Shell does come out, we actually get that within the solution within 24 hours. I think it took us 14 and a half hours to get the resolution to Log4Shell into Runecast. So we're really looking out for our customers. We really want to ensure that, the solution works for you and makes sure that you're really compliant in your environment and to make sure that, if there is a new vulnerability, you can deal with that. So what I would like to do today is I'm going to give you an overview of Runecast. We're going to focus on vulnerabilities, but I would like to show you, there's more to Runecast than just vulnerability management. So I'd like to show you exactly what you can achieve with Runecast, but also show to you, what we can do with those vulnerabilities, because there's actually quite a lot that we need to take in. We need risk assessment. We need to know where we're going to start. That's one of the most difficult things for any company is, okay, I've just bought this new solution. Where do I start with it? It's showing me all of these issues. Where do I start? How do I get on with this? So without further ado, let me share a screen and let's dive straight in. Okay, so I'm going to stop my video here just because I'm worried I might get some lag. But yeah, let's have a look and see exactly what we're looking at here. So with Runecast, what we can see is the main dashboard here. And this is giving me that nice overview so that when I come in first thing in the morning, or, maybe you work the night shift, who knows. But when I come into the office, I can actually have a look here and I can see how my compliance has been over the last 10 analysis. I've got all my systems down here on the right hand side. Now for certain systems, for my VMware, there's going to be some hardware compatibility issues that I've got. We can see that here. So Runecast measures you against the HCL to make sure that we can actually keep you compatible. And I can see all of my systems that are connected here. And when it was last analyzed, how many issues I'm having here and how many inventory objects I have going on in this environment. So this is a really nice overview. So first thing is vulnerabilities, which is what we're all here about today. And for the vulnerabilities, I can see I have 32 KEV issues, but a total of 319 issues in total. So for those of you who may not be aware, KEV issues are known exploited vulnerabilities. So these are vulnerabilities that CISA have been made aware of by people in the field, that people are actually exploiting these vulnerabilities. So we're just talking about that part where I need to be, aware of where do I start? How do I jump on top of this if I've got because I've got 319 issues here. And the first place that we're going to want to start with vulnerabilities is on known exploited vulnerabilities. It doesn't mean that the vulnerabilities that are not known to have been exploited don't need to be looked at. It just means that we know that people are using these as attack vectors, so we need to hone in on these and deal with these vulnerabilities. So Runecast covers VMware, Kubernetes, Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. And we also cover operating systems. So when I'm looking here, at the top here, I can see my knowledge base articles for VMware, how many issues I have. These are log KBs discovered in the last 7 days. So that's if VMware has created an article about the log issues, we're going to see those here. And as I come down, I can see my security compliance here. So it might be that you're working in the finance sector and you need PCI DSS, or in a hospital, you need HIPAA. For Germany, we have the BSI IT Grundschutz. We have quite a few security compliance areas that we can actually have a look at here. And depending on what you need to conform to, for example, if you just need ISO and GDPR, you can turn these on and off as you want in Runecast. There's no extra costs or anything like that. Everything that you see here today is built into Runecast, and that's what you get when you pay for your licenses. So as I scroll down, I can see the top issues that I'm having in my environment. And again, I can see here I've got known exploited vulnerability issues. And these are some of the top issues that I'm having. And one of the things about Runecast is that we have something that you won't find anywhere else, which is configuration drift with our configuration vault. So this is looking at, for example, my hosts that are running my VMware. And we'll have a dig into this a bit later on. But if I jump in here, I can see that actually, where changes have happened in my environment, where changes have happened to these hosts and where they haven't. So if it's blank like this, it should be all fine. But this enables me from the main dashboard to get this complete overview and see, immediately what's going on in my environment, so I can decide exactly where I want to dive in and start working. So one of the main things that you will notice probably with your companies is that you have to do some auditing as well. One of the things that we can really achieve well with Runecast is reporting. So it doesn't matter if you're having to do auditing from an outside auditor or whether it's an internal audit. We can use these detected issues here, and we can have a look through at our severities, the different profiles, so I can really start to select down exactly what I want to see. So for example, if I say I want to have a look at ISO, and I just want to have a look at that in my VMware. So this is giving me the overview here of how my compliance has been. I can go back for any period of time that I want to here and create a report at the top here as well to export that report. Now, one of the great things that we've just introduced is that now the URL here changes for exactly how you filtered. So I can actually bookmark this. If I need to be able to constantly use the same report and I don't want to have to filter all the time for it, I can bookmark that, and I can then use that every time I need to create that report. So that's a really handy thing for auditing. So I don't want to go through everything one by one. I know that that's not particularly attractive, and I know that what everyone's turned up here today for is looking at the vulnerabilities. So let's jump into the vulnerabilities here. And before we start off on that, I would just like to point out that, with Runecast, I've got some generic dashboards here, my detected issues, which we just looked at. We can go through our inventory, but you can see here we're broken up into security and compliance and IT operations. So if I want to see my security, it's all listed out here. And my vulnerabilities, which I've just selected. So I can jump in exactly at any point that I want to see something. One of the other things that you're going to notice with Runecast is that all of the dashboards look the same. So you may have looked at some other software vendors, and you will notice that the dashboards are not all the same, or they have different modules that you have to learn. And this is really time consuming within your team, because if I need to learn a different module for vulnerabilities to, for example, my security compliance for ISO, that's double the learning time. And what you're going to see here today is that actually Runecast has practically no learning curve. There are a couple of areas where you need to have a play around, like the configuration vault. But again, that doesn't take too long to understand. You can get to grips with the configuration vault within half an hour. So let's have a look at our vulnerabilities. So what we can see on this dashboard here, I can see my severities here. So I've got a lot of criticals, what the CVE number actually is. And as we were discussing earlier, is this known to be exploited? So I've got my known exploited vulnerabilities here. These aren't known to be exploited. And we can actually, select this and decide if we want to just see the known exploited or ones that are not known to be exploited. So I can play around with these filters here. It's telling me what this is, the impact that I have in my environment. So I've got 50% failed here. And if we jump into one of these, let's have a look. This is what Runecast is really about. So Runecast, basically, we have proprietary software which scrapes all the information from the internet. So for example, when VMware releases a new knowledge base article, or a VMSA in this case, our software will pick up on that. It will download it for us, and then we put that straight into Runecast. So this means that we do weekly updates. So once a week, when I get updated, it means I've got all of the latest information in Runecast, and I don't actually have to do any of that myself. It actually works the same way for updates with the appliance itself. So when we release a new update, it automatically updates itself. So you don't actually have to touch anything, which is beautiful. So let's have a look at this vulnerability here. So I can see how many affected objects I have and how many are passing. We can see if we have unlicensed objects in our environment. So for example, if I add a new host, that's not going to be licensed necessarily. I haven't linked up the license, or maybe if I've added 10 new hosts, I need to buy 10 new licenses for those hosts. So that's going to show me here, which alerts me to the fact that, if I want to see the information on those hosts, I need to get some new licenses. We can see if we've filtered out. So with Runecast, you can filter anything out. It might be that an issue comes up and you say, actually, that doesn't apply to my environment. I've set my environment up in a specific way and I don't need to see that. So we can filter that out. So I've got an impact here, how that's impacting my environment. And the overall result here is failed because I've got 15% objects failing. I've got this one object here failing. So if we dive onto the right-hand side here, we can see the CVE number. We know it's known exploited. And as I was saying before, this is from CISA. So CISA create these known exploited vulnerabilities, or they don't create them. They create a list of them, moreover. And CISA works hand in hand with the US military. So, you know, this is really hardened or enabling you to harden your environment by the top standards that the military are using in the Department of Defense. So if you are working with American government or military, you do need to have these dealt with by certain dates. So we include that there for you as well. And we can see, you know, the overall issue detail of which product that's for, where the original source is. And something to note is that Runecast always links back to exactly where we've taken that information. So none of the information in Runecast is made by us. It's all information from the vendor who produces that, and it puts that information right at your fingertips. So what I can see here is I've got my main details, and we've got some information as well, some extra information about the known exploited vulnerability. But as I scroll down, I'm going to see, you know, which products this impacts. And I've got my resolution here immediately. So I can see exactly, you know, what's going to need to be done. And this is telling me to apply patches. And we can see those in the response matrix down below. So if I scroll down here, depending on which version of VMware I'm running, there's a different patch. So again, this all links in directly, so I can just select that, go straight to where that download is, download that, and get on with my work. So I think what we can see here is that firstly, we have a solution which is showing me what I need to deal with first. So it's not just that we deal with critical, high, medium, and low issues. So I don't just, for my vulnerabilities, I'm not just going to dive in here and say, okay, well, I guess I should start at the top with the critical vulnerabilities. Some of the vulnerabilities that we're going to see are not necessarily, you know, if they're critical, they're not necessarily going to be a KEV. So we can see here, these are not known exploited vulnerabilities, but it's a critical vulnerability. So I have 2 points of attack here now. Firstly, I'm going to start off with those known exploited vulnerabilities, because I want to make sure that, you know, things that are out there in the wild that are being used to attack my environment are going to be shut down immediately. But secondly, there are some other critical vulnerabilities here that I need to deal with. So these are not known to be exploited out in the wild, but just because it's not known and it hasn't been reported doesn't mean that someone's not going to exploit that. So this would be my second point of attack, is after I've dealt with my known exploited vulnerabilities, I'm going to start having a look at the critical vulnerabilities which are left in my environment. Okay, I'm just going to very quickly check the chat and see if there's anything in there. So whilst I'm running through this, I would like to ask, please, you know, if you have questions, please put them in the webinar Q&A. And I'm looking at the Q&A at the moment, and there are no questions in there at the moment. So I will assume that everyone's good with what I've just told you, and let's push forward and have a look at what we can achieve with the rest of Runecast. So I'm going to drop the compliance profiles down here for my security, and let's take a typical one, ISO 27001. So what we can see here is that, again, I've got a very similar dashboard. We can see that this covers different products. So I've got my AWS here, vSphere, and this is going to show me, you know, depending on which products I'm using and what I need this for, it's going to show me the information about what I need to deal with. So here we have passwords must be at least 15 characters in length. This is an interesting one because for quite a lot of information, we can automate and check with an automated scan. But for some things, you're going to actually go and need to check that yourself manually. So to make sure that my passwords are 15 characters in length, obviously Runecast is not going to delve into your personal information, that your personal data that you're holding on the in your environment. So I've got a manual answer here. I can see exactly where I need to check this. And when I've done that, I can go into my manual answers. So when I've done that check and I know that's correct, I can select where I've done that check and I can update this answer. When I do this, I can either leave it for the expiry date that it's giving me, or I can say, actually, I want to check this sooner or later. And just, you know, maybe if you, depending on the time span that you update your passwords, you would want to do it by that. So when I've answered this, that's going to actually give, it's going to save that answer, that's not going to come back up and tell me to check it again within that time period. But it also shows us exactly who has who's answered that. So this means that when that's been answered, if someone goes in and double checks it and it's not been done, we have accountability for who's actually been in the system and saying, you know, you can't just go through, click everything yes and say, you know, I can't be bothered to look at that. Let's update that with yes, because if someone double checks that, it's going to have your login and it's going to say, yeah, you check this. So that means that, yeah, we've got that accountability there, which is great. So I could run through lots and lots. I will quickly jump in here to best practices. Again, we're looking at the same dashboards, but what I want to point out here is these little lightning strikes. So we have the option to remediate issues. Now, it's not just for the areas where we have the lightning strike. So if there's a simple line of PowerShell that we need to run, that might be in there just as a simple line. But where we actually need to create a script, we've actually included this in here. And I can select either one or both of these hosts. It's going to give me a simple overview of what's going to happen, and I can generate the script here. So we can see here, I can run that as Power CLI, or I can run that as an Ansible playbook. Everything here is noted, so I can see exactly what this code is going to do and where it's going to do it. So this is actually custom building the code to my environment. So then I can copy this to clipboard or download the script and away I go. So again, you know, the whole point of Runecast, to make your lives really, really simple, and so that you can get on with your jobs and be proactive in the environment. So I've just seen a question come up. So does Runecast detect package level vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities which require commands to be executed on the hosts? So I'm not 100% sure. Suman, would you mind expanding on your question there? So, you know, for the vulnerabilities that we detect, we're detecting vulnerabilities which, as I was saying earlier, have been, you know, people know about these vulnerabilities, they publish about the vulnerability. So we're looking for these vulnerabilities which are known to be out there. So that covers vulnerabilities for VMware, for your operating systems, vulnerabilities in the cloud, and for Kubernetes as well. So does it detect vulnerabilities at driver or module or executable levels? I would have to get back to you on that one. That's quite deep and technical, and yeah, I don't want to go into that sort of level within this call. But we have, can it detect vulnerabilities which need commands to be detected? So this is getting quite deep. So what I'd like to do is get back to you individually on that, if you don't mind, because that's, yeah, okay, I've got a thumbs up on that. Thanks, Simon, because yeah, I would rather be able to explain that absolutely in full to you from a technical point of view, and we don't really have that much time to be able to dive into it right now. But that's a great question, thank you. Okay, so yeah, this is the remediation, which we can see really speeds up our process and helps us to be proactive in the environment. I could dive into knowledge base articles here, but again, we're seeing exactly the same thing dashboard wise. But yeah, with the knowledge base articles from VMware, we can see the resolution here, and it's resolved in some updates that I need to do. So again, we've got the Customer Connect patch downloads page there, and there's a workaround as well from VMware. What I would like to show you next is the hardware compatibility for VMware. So one of the big struggles, and this is why Runecast was created initially, was to cover VMware, but we've, as I was saying, expanded into the cloud, Kubernetes, and OS over the years. So one of the first things that was in here was covering the hardware compatibility list. I'm sure you're well aware, if you're running VMware, that it's a real pain that I need to check through all of my drivers, firmware, and BIOS. Then I need to go to the VMware website and check it against their list. Then I can deal with what's going on. So the whole point here, again, all that information at my fingertips. So if I select this, I can see there's an issue here. And I've got some IO device and vSAN controller issues. So if we have a look at this, so it's telling me that not found in the HCL because it's not supported. This driver is not supported with this release. So this card, sorry. So I either need to, no, it will be the smart array, yeah. So I either need to update here. We can see I'm not on update 3. If I go to update 3, then this is going to be supported. And again, for my vSAN controllers here, I can see that the firmware here is not found in the HCL, meaning it's not supported with this driver. So what I need to do for that driver, if I just double check really quickly. So yeah, I'm going to need to update my drivers and my firmware here, or just the driver to this, preferably both. But this gives me a really fast overview of exactly, what's going on from the HCL point of view. And the other way that we can use this is that we can, if I select the release here, we can actually simulate an upgrade. So if I say I want to go to 8, you can see here I'm on version 6.7 and 7. I can simulate this. So before I decide to do that update, I can have a look here and I can see, okay, it doesn't actually like my ProLiance at all. And again, the firmware is not found here. So I'm going to have to do some driver firmware updates to make this work if I'm going to do these upgrades. So this is really, really handy. It's normally really time consuming to do this. And this gives me that information right at my fingertips. So earlier on, I was discussing the configuration vault, and I really want to show you this because this is a really powerful part of Runecast, one of the more powerful parts. So if I select an environment, I'm going to select this one because I know that all of these are connected. And I can have a look at exactly what's going on here. So I can see the vendor, the model, how much memory I've got applied to that, the CPU models, ESXi versions, and much more. So what I can do is I can say, okay, I've set this host up to be exactly how I want it to be. And by the way, with the drop downs at the top here, we can check, just for immediate information. So how are my SSH service policies? 100% on. If that's how I want it to be, then that's super. But that might show me as well Everything seems good in my environment. Okay, so NTP service policy. So if they're all supposed to be off, and I've got 25%, so that's one of these hosts has it on, I can check that, so I can see it's this host here. And if I need to deal with that, that gives me immediate hands-on for that. So what I can do is I can, let's just clear the filters here. I can say, okay, I've set up this host here and I want to use that as a baseline. So I can jump into baseline comparisons here. So if I select this host as my baseline, I can come in here and have a look at what's different. So it's showing me the ESXi versions different. Okay, I've got different CPU models. And as we scroll further down, we can see the advanced settings as well and see what's different in there. So that allows me to see, what's going on with these hosts, what I need to change to make them all match up. And then obviously over time, we're going to get some drift. So it might be that someone goes and turns off a service because they need to make a change and they forget to turn it back on. So what we will see here is that I can say, okay, I made this change at this time, or rather I set my baseline at this time. And if I apply this, I can see here the changes in my environment. So I can see I've got services running that was stopped and the SSH service policy is on and it should be off. So it might be that you want those set round the other way. But yeah, this shows me exactly where I've got that drift and exactly, what I need to go back and change. And once again, we have accountability in here. So if I have a look at the tasks, it's going to show me the initiator of this. And if I scroll through, I can see the history of it. John Doe is obviously been doing some very good stuff because he's got 3 successes there. But as I scroll through, I can see who's made those changes, at which date that started and when it finished. And that gives me that accountability within the team to be able to go and question them and say, hey, why is this service off when it should be on? Hopefully the answer would be, I just forgot to turn it back on again. Okay, I'm just going to double check in the Q&A right now. And I can see, so there's a question about the controller is not a DL360 server. Is that information correct? I can't remember exactly what we were looking at, but the IO, I believe at that time I was looking at the IO device. I can't answer you that. I don't know about those servers. So it's, the hardware compatibility is all about checking your driver's firmware and BIOS to make sure they're in line with the VMware hardware compatibility list, because obviously if they're not, that's the first thing that VMware are going to say to you, is that you need to go and correct that before they will have a look at any issues that you send to them. But the idea behind Runecast is that actually, hopefully you wouldn't need to be waiting on support to see those issues and to see the resolutions, because Runecast provides that to you straight up. Okay, so I'm looking at the time. We've got 9 minutes left and I still have some things that I want to show you. One of them is the inventory. So when we're deep diving into our environment, it might be that I want to come in here and actually be able to see at from a different perspective exactly what's going on in my environment. So we can do that in here. And again, that gives me the information of what these issues are that are going on in my environment. And if I select that, this is going to change in the next release. That's going to bring us back to the same window that we saw before, but it still provides at the moment here the technical descriptions and all of the information I need to remediate that issue. But I think the final 2 parts that I want to show you is that it's very possible that you have your own in-house compliance. So if you do have your own in-house compliance, then this means that we can build our own framework. So if you have two teams working together, so your security team asks the tech team, okay, I need you to make sure that, for example, the example we saw earlier on in ISO, need you to make sure that you've got minimum 15 character passwords. So I can actually start to build up everything they ask me here. And we can do this in the definition database. So this allows me to come in and I can say, actually, from my personal knowledge, I know that CIS and ISO are very strong compliance, and I want to have a look for password information. Let's just skim this down to VMware because it makes it a bit easier to see what's going on here. So for CIS, I've got a few options here. Ensure passwords are required to be complex. Ensure password pass-through is disabled, and ensure there should be somewhere here. Yeah, ensure previous 5 passwords are prohibited. So this could be really interesting for me to build up my internal framework. So if I have a look here, this is going to tell me that I need to have a minimum 14 characters. And we can see here that we have to have one of the characters from each of the major sets. So a number, a capital, a small letter, and a special character as well. So if I think that that works for my profile that I want to build up, I can copy this issue to the profile here. I can decide on the severity. Maybe that's critical for me. I can leave a note or change the title if I want to, and copy this issue out. So let's copy this issue out to Cyprus 123. So in this way, I should be able to come in here and see that it's just been added here. And this means that we can, as you can see, we can actually build up our own frameworks and ensure that anything internal that we need to keep an eye on, we can build up here. And then obviously if I need ISO or other various security standards, we obviously have that built into Runecast. So then I can, use that in combination to stay right on top of everything. The last thing I would like to show you today is that we have what we call the log inspector. So this is another really, really handy part of Runecast. And the idea here is not to compete with things like Log Insight and Splunk. I'm sure if you're using these tools, you will understand that it's not that straightforward to pull out the log information that you're looking for. So the idea of this is to make it really quick and simple. We can see the keywords that have been pulled out in my environment. So this will grow and shrink depending on where these issues are coming from in my logs. And I can say, okay, today I've got on a specific host, there's some serious problem going on. What's happening? So I can actually have a look at the hosts here and I can select this and say, okay, what's going on there? Which programs are causing me this issue? So really, really quickly, again, putting my fingertips on that information. And if I select one of these, that's going to give me a timeline. So this is constantly going on in my environment of what's actually happening here. Now, if we just drop back a second and I say, okay, I want to have a look at failed to, for example. So I can select it here, or we have this drop down up here. And again, I just wanted to point out that we can see the keywords here that have been pulled out. So this gives me an overview of what's going on with my logs. And again, this is going to grow and shrink depending on the issues that I'm having at the moment. So one thing to note about this, I said at the start of this that we're not trying to compete with Log Insight and Splunk and those sorts of tools. We are not a log collector, so we delete the logs after 60 days. The whole idea of Runecast is just to get your fingertips on that information and to be able to see it immediately and get on with your job and be proactive in your workplace rather than having to run around and look for this information. Okay, so I think that's a fairly comprehensive overview of Runecast Analyzer. Do we have any further questions from the audience at this moment? Okay, so I would like to thank everyone very much for joining us today. I hope that this has been comprehensive for you and that you've enjoyed what you've seen and that you like what you've seen. Of course, if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us at runecast/contact. But also, visit our website, runecast.com, and you can contact us via that as well. And then we will get the appropriate sales team member from your area to contact you. I'm seeing lots of thumbs going up on the screen, so that's great. Thank you very much. So I would like to again, thank you very much for your attendance today. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to us at runecast.com. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.